and welcome to the Plant School podcast. I'm Rachel Tenney, and here we learn all about plants, how they work, how to care for them, and it's all taught in a way that anyone from beginner to expert can listen to, understand, and enjoy. So I hope that you will join me in Plant School. Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast. So, before I even begin this episode, I actually have a really exciting event to share with you guys. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of the app Whatnot, but it's an live stream marketplace where you can buy and sell items, and this includes plants. And Whatnot is actually holding a live stream event from December 12th through the 14th, so that's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's called Whatnot Wonderland, and sellers are going to be offering exclusive plant deals and rare finds, and this event also includes live giveaways and perks like free shipping, and I even have a link for you guys to use. It's in the description of this episode. If you click on it, you will get $15 to spend as a first-time buyer. You can use it in the plants category or honestly anywhere on the platform. I've personally used Whatnot before, and it is such a fun place for just browsing around, finding unique and new plants, and you can find them for really incredible deals. The other day, there was a rare anthurium plant I saw in there. They usually go for about like $200, and it sold for only $30. So if you're interested in some really great deals, use my link in the description of this episode to download the app Whatnot. I'm going to be hopping on as well during this event just so I can check out all the fun items and all the deals that are going on during the Whatnot Wonderland 3-day event. Again, it is December 12th through the 14th, so mark your calendars for Whatnot Wonderland on the Whatnot app and snag a really great deal. And this actually flows really well into what we're going to be talking about today, because I wanted to do an episode. I did one kind of like this before. It's been years, guys, since I did this episode, and it's one of the first 50 that has now been archived because those first 50 episodes are just so different from what the podcast is now. It's now been archived, but I did one about online plant trading, and I wanted to kind of take that one and tweak it to talk about the world of online plant shopping. Because if you've never bought a houseplant online, sometimes it feels a little intimidating, or maybe you're worried about being scammed, which is a real worry. And I just want to go over everything so that doesn't happen. Before I start, I have not forgotten our giveaway winners, so let's do those real quick. Every episode, I take a giveaway winner. I take 2 of them. I take someone who has left a review on Apple Podcasts and someone who has commented on the latest episode of Plant School Podcast on Spotify. So whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can have a chance to win. What you're winning as a giveaway winner is a package from Market Botany, and it includes their Leaf Shine and their Prop Drops, which is a water propagation aid. Both products I have used. I still use them all the time, and I love them. So first, let's start with Apple Podcasts. The person who won and has left a review, their username is Cat Creative. I'm pretty sure I follow this person on Instagram because I definitely recognize that username. They said, I've always loved plants, but recently started researching of how to take care of them and have become obsessed. Rachel's podcast is so informative and easy listening. I binged the last 2 years of episodes in one weekend. That's impressive. And look forward to continuing to listen. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for that really kind review. If you want to reach out to me by emailing me at tenneyplants@gmail.com, that's TENNEY plants@gmail.com, or since we follow each other on Instagram, you can reach out to me there. I'll get your address and we will send that giveaway package your way. Moving over to Spotify. So last episode was about medicinal houseplants. I asked you guys if you've ever used houseplants for medicinal purposes. A lot of you had, which was really fun. Also, just a shout out to all of you who commented telling me congrats on my new baby. That was so kind of you. I just wanted to throw that out there. But our winner today is Kaylee Stowell. She said, I love aloe for burns. I've had my aloe for 8 years. I love an aloe plant too. So, Kaylee Stoll, if you will email me at tinnyplants@gmail.com, I will get your giveaway package on its way to you as well. And if you would like to win in next episode's giveaway, super simple to enter. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, just scroll down, leave a review. Or if you're listening on Spotify, scroll down and leave a comment for this episode. For this episode, I want to know if you guys have ever bought a houseplant online, and how did it go for you? All right, let's dive into this episode. Assuming that we all know what online plant shopping is, I feel like I don't need to explain it. It's literally buying houseplants online. It can be local, it can be across the world. And I want to start first, and I kind of explained this before, doing a little bit of education behind how online plant shopping works before we get into the best practices behind it, so you don't get scammed, so you aren't doing anything illegal, because yes, that is a thing. So first, let's learn how it all works. How does it go from a seed to a houseplant sitting on a shelf in your home? So we're going to be doing a little lesson on supply chain right now. I don't know if you expected that, but it's actually really simple. And obviously it is not exactly this way all across the board, but in general, these are the steps from a seed to a houseplant in your home. So step 1, the plants are grown by growers, and often this is done by actually micro-propagation, not so often by seed. It kind of depends on the plant, but a lot of growers will use micro-propagation. They do this because all they need is a very tiny bit of material, and you don't need a whole lot of space for micro-propagations. They start out so small that you can do hundreds upon thousands and it won't take up much space. They can also do it with larger cuttings, where they are taking cuttings from a mother plant and propagating those to create a lot of stock. So as they grow, all of that plant stock is at some point transported from the growers to wholesalers. These wholesalers will take these plants, they take care of them, they store them, and they get them ready for retailers to be sold in shops. And these retail stores are often the last stop before it reaches a consumer's home. So whether it is an in-person store or it's an online store, this is the last step before you walk in or you log in and buy that plant. And some facilities, they take this whole supply chain and they support it all by themselves. They have their own facilities where they are growing plant stock and they sell it directly to you at a discounted price, and they can kind of skip all those other steps. But a lot of these stores, whether online or in person, are kind of a mix of growing it on their own, or they are getting some supplies from growers or wholesalers, and they can sell it to you accordingly. Now, this supply chain doesn't come without its little kinks in the chain. So there are some problems with it. The first one, and this kind of relates to all of the steps in the supply chain, if you lack organization and planning skills, you can often end up with too much stock. So to be more precise, they use what's called demand planning. And if that is off, then they will have all this extra stock or all these extra plants. And the decision to keep it alive or to toss it is kind of a hard one, because to keep it alive, they have to put resources into it. They have to water it. Staff has to be watching out for it, make sure it's doing well, and it can be really costly. Oftentimes, it is easier and more cost efficient for them to just throw out those plants. So planning is crucial for every step of a supply chain when it comes to the plant world, because it's not something you can just set on a shelf and forget about, and it's not going to expire. It's a living thing, and you have to be taking care of it. Another problem with this supply chain is that growers face a lot of risk. So factors like drought, plant disease, and flooding can come into play. This is especially true if the plants are being grown outdoors and not in a greenhouse. When it comes to houseplants, a lot of them are in greenhouses. In some areas of the world, and I'm thinking here in the US, it's probably like Florida and Southern California, where it's very warm year-round. These houseplants are grown both indoors and outdoors. But you would still, even with houseplants, plant disease would be a huge factor. If it takes over a whole greenhouse, a whole area, it can spread so quickly, and that is another risk in this supply chain. And understanding these risks that growers are taking on can help you understand more of why prices rise and fall, because if they do deal with a disease that wipes out all their stock, that can raise prices because there is a low supply. And another flaw within this supply chain, and this one's kind of interesting, it gets into the legalities of the supply chain. There is unfortunately unethical and illegal poaching of plants. This is actually really common with certain succulents. So, for example, in South Africa, there's different succulents. They take decades to grow, but around 2019, there wasn't a whole lot of jobs, and people started to look into illegal plant poaching, and these succulents took the brunt of it, where people were out getting cuttings of them or completely uprooting them so that they could earn money to support their families. Here in the U.S. and California, there was a man who illegally poached hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of the Dudleya succulents, and he took it from the California coast, and it is illegal to go in and take these plants, and he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. This happened in 2002, so really recently, although he is probably out of jail at this point. And just because I find this interesting, there was another big bust in the illegal plant poaching world. It happened in 2020. They found more than 1,000 of some of the world's rarest cactuses. They had been smuggled into Italy from Chile, and the value of them was over $1.2 million, and they were set to be sold on the black market. I had no idea there was even a black market for houseplants. I guess I should have assumed it existed, but just know illegal practices are going into the black market. So don't support it. If you know how to even support it, where is the black market? I'm not sure. But if you know how, don't do it. And this brings me to my next point. We've pointed out some of the flaws that they are dealing with, or just some of the problems that they have to deal with, the risks. I want to get into the laws. Are there any laws to this industry? Obviously, it is illegal to plant poach these protected plants and disrupt their native habitats, but there are actually other laws. There are seed and plant exchange laws. It is regulated by the government. They do vary depending on what country you're from, what state you live in, and your local laws. So I'm not going to dive into all of them because some of them are very localized. But just know that if someone is selling you a plant from a different country, they actually have to get what's called a phytosanitary certification, which is just making sure that they are selling the plants that they say they are. And this is required for most everything. It includes plants, bulbs, tubers, seeds, fruits, vegetables, cut flowers, and it even goes into like grain and growing medium for plants. And seeds are heavily regulated. They have a whole set of seed regulation laws and standards in the Federal Seed Act here in the U.S. because they don't want any sort of foreign and noxious weeds coming in. Seeds are of big importance to have those regulations in place. And then there's also the factor that some people will accidentally sell you invasive plants. Perhaps they don't know that they're doing so. But just as a consumer, it's important to know that you should be putting in at least some research so you're not buying an invasive plant to your area, or you're not supporting someone who is going around the rules and regulations and selling you something that they shouldn't be. Most of the time, though, if you are buying from a reputable website or selling site, they are the ones checking that for you. Okay, and before I get into, how to buy a houseplant online and all the ins and outs of it, here are just quickly some fun little stats about online plant sales. So if you have been maybe living under a rock, houseplants really grew in popularity during the pandemic, and a lot of influencers were doing plant swaps online because they couldn't do them in person, and houseplant online sales just skyrocketed. Just for a reference, and I know this is more of a broader scope, but 18.3 million people started gardening in 2020. 32% of garden centers have reported that 30% or more of their sales came solely from houseplants and houseplant-related items. So a huge chunk of their sales, the most popular type of plant that these centers sell, it's kind of two ends of the spectrum here, which is pretty funny. So the two most popular are beginner/low care plants, and then rare/unusual varieties. And the most popular size that is being sold online is plants in 4-inch containers, with 6-inch being the second most popular offering that these garden centers have. All right, so let's get into the shopping. First question that you would probably have is, where are the best spots to buy a plant online? And there are so many. Holy cow, there are so many. I think with the pandemic and houseplants being in such high demand, the online space has really exploded with how many different websites offer houseplants. But here are just a few. Let's start with like your traditional curated website. So this would include websites like thesill.com, SILL, bloomscape.com, coastafarms.com. I think Costa Farms is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, supplier of houseplants here in the US, and you can buy directly from them. Another example is livelyroot.com, and I actually went into some Reddit forums to find out what the houseplant community really likes when it comes to online plant shopping. I did this because it's not like I've bought hundreds of plants online. I've done it like once or twice. And so I wanted to see what other people recommended. And these are the ones that I kept seeing as being great online plant stores to buy from. First one is plantproper.com. Another one was gabriellaplants.com. That one popped up quite a bit. And then also pistilsnursery.com. Pistils as in like a plant pistil, so PISTILS. And then two others that I saw pretty frequently was SpokanePlantFarm.com and StevesLeaves.com. And then I also wanted to cover websites that do more of like live selling of plants, or they're more specialized with single sellers. So if you're like looking for a really great deal, these websites can be really great ones. First of all, goes great with what I talked about at the beginning of this episode is the Whatnot app. I mentioned that I've used it. I've used it to buy a pair of shoes, not a plant. But I have been looking on there at their houseplants. There are so many sellers. Some of them I recognize from Instagram. And again, if you guys want a free $15 to spend and check out the Whatnot Wonderland event that's happening December 12th through the 14th, Thursday through Saturday, you can click on the link in the description of this episode and get that $15 to spend. It's like getting a free houseplant, honestly. And that's actually when I first used the Whatnot app. I was following someone who was talking about their $15 offer. I used it. I didn't pay a single dime for the shoes I bought. So I'm so excited to be able to offer this to you guys, to go and snag a really great deal on a houseplant, whether that $15 like gets you a discount on a houseplant you really want, or it gets you it for free, depending on the price that you get the plant at. I'm just so excited to be able to offer that to you guys. All right, let's keep going. Another website that does like specialized plant sales by a single seller is eBay. And then also there's Etsy. Etsy does this as well. It's huge in the houseplant world. And then, of course, there are Facebook plant groups where you can buy plants on there. You can meet up with people in person, or I know that you can find people who will ship to you as well. Now, my next question I want to cover is, are all retailers safe? Because we talked about the different risks of people not following rules and regulations or not giving you what they say they are giving you. But I do want to assure you that most all websites follow these guidelines, and they do not allow illegal plants. They do not allow you to go around those rules and regulations set up by the government. The only one I would use with caution, because it is a little more unregulated, is a Facebook group. When I looked at websites, even like Etsy, they had requirements and rules when it comes to houseplant sales that sellers have to adhere to when they are selling. Of course, it's always good to like check the reviews of that Etsy seller and just be really thorough about that. eBay also has their rules, but I did notice they seemed a little bit more relaxed. It looks like their rules mostly just prohibit any plant material that is not grown in the US and any sort of noxious weed. And I even saw Reddit forums where users were actually warning other people from buying from foreign sellers on eBay. They had had really bad luck with that. But that is where eBay mostly draws the line of you cannot buy plant material from foreign sellers. Other than that, I'm not sure how rigorous eBay is about its rules when it comes to selling houseplants on their site. So that's something just to be cautious about. I think most people are good, honest people who are selling you what they say they are selling you, but it's always wise to use caution, especially with a website that's a little more unregulated. Okay, let's quickly talk about how the plants arrive from the online stores, and then I briefly want to go over how to adapt them into your home once it's arrived to you. So how they arrive, it largely depends on who's sending it and where they are sending it to. In general, most will send them by a quick shipping service, whether it's expedited or ground shipping, just so that that plant can get to you quickly and lessen the chance of it dying. And if you do order plants in the wintertime, a lot of stores will even put in these small heat packs to keep the plant from freezing, or sometimes they won't even ship at all if the temperature is really extreme, and I'm talking 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometimes they will shut down shipping services to areas that are dealing with that freezing weather. And then depending on what you've ordered, it changes of how it will arrive. So for example, if it's a cutting, they most often arrive wrapped in a moist medium like moss, or sometimes they'll have, it looks like a sort of plastic test tube with a rubber cap that you can slip the cutting down into, and it keeps water around the roots. And then they're usually packed in some sort of wrapping paper or bubble wrap. Another way that plants can come is bare root, where it has no soil, no pot, and this really cuts down on shipping costs because it weighs so much less. They often come like cuttings do, with some moist moss with it so that those roots can stay hydrated, or it will come with wet paper towels, or sometimes they'll even make a slurry with polymer moisture crystals. It's the kind of stuff that you find in a baby's diaper that really just absorbs water. They make a slurry of that, and then they spread it on wet paper towels, and then they wrap it around the roots to just kind of extend the lifetime of how that moisture is held. And then if you're ordering from a conventional website like thesale.com, where they have curated plants, it will probably come in its nursery pot or in a decorative pot if you've ordered that as well. And they come in these specialized boxes that keep all of the soil intact. They wrap up the foliage usually with a sort of paper that you can pull off to keep it from getting damaged. And once you've received the houseplant, let's talk about what to do with it. If it's cutting, put it in whatever medium that you prefer, whether it's soil, moss, or water. If it's a bare root plant, put it in soil as soon as you can and thoroughly water that soil. Let the excess water drain out. You just don't want any dry pockets of soil that can really damage the plant. I've done it, and I killed a peace lily by not watering it thoroughly enough, and the soil remained dry, and it killed that freshly repotted plant. So you just want to make sure that first watering is really thorough. And then if it comes in soil and with a pot, there's not much you really need to do besides giving it an environment that it's used to, which brings me to my next point, and maybe the most important point, that you want to kind of mimic what this plant is used to. Coming from those curated websites, it's probably used to a lot of light, being in a greenhouse where it's getting everything it needs. If you have ordered from a seller, whether it's on the Whatnot app or if it's from Etsy or Facebook Marketplace, those are nice because you can actually ask the seller, hey, how are you growing this plant, this cutting? What were the humidity levels like? Just so that you can mimic where it came from, the environment or the home that it was in. Mimic that for a time as it adjusts to your home and the environment in your home. And that can significantly help the plant survive and do well, especially when it comes to something like a cutting where it's a little bit fragile. It's not like a well-established plant. But with that being said, that wraps up my guide to ordering a houseplant online. I hope you feel a little bit more educated about it now. You know what goes into it. You know how to go about it. You know what websites are great for buying houseplants and which ones you may need to do a little homework on. And with that, I hope you will be back in 2 weeks for a brand new episode of the Plant School Podcast. And I hope you are all having a lovely December. And also, I hope to see you guys at the Whatnot Wonderland event, December 12th through the 14th. Use that link in my description for $15 so you can go grab a fun houseplant on me. Thank you so much for being here and for listening to the Plant School Podcast. I hope that you will join me for our next episode. And if you would like to support this podcast and keep it going, there's a link down in the show notes of this episode where you can donate to this podcast. And I really appreciate all that help. Or you can go to my merch store, which is also linked in the notes of this episode. And you can find some really cool plant-related shirts and stickers. And if you want to support the podcast but spend no money, feel free to share it with a friend, leave a review. All these things greatly help me out and allow me to keep doing this. Again, thank you so much for listening and for being here at the Plant School Podcast.